The host wanted to make an example out of Stallone. Instead, he became the perfect example of why people don't trust mainstream media anymore. The studio lights were bright, too bright, the kind that made people sweat even when they weren't. Nervous, but Sylvester Stallone wasn't nervous. He sat back in the chair, legs apart, shoulders relaxed, waiting. The audience murmured in anticipation, some clutching their phones, already poised to record. They knew something was about to happen. Across from him sat Ethan Caldwell, a polished, sharp-dressed TV host known for his progressive slant and love of gotcha moments. He leaned forward, a smug grin creeping across his face. He had interviewed politicians, activists, and Hollywood elites, always managing to get them to stumble. But Stallone? That was new territory. Ethan, Mr. Stallone, you've always been a symbol of American toughness. But do you think that kind of masculinity is outdated? I mean, in today's world, don't you think we should redefine strength to be more inclusive? A few audience members chuckled. Some nodded in agreement. Ethan's fans, the kind who expected him to trap his guests in their own words. Stallone blinked. A slow, deliberate blink. Then he leaned in, elbows on his knees, and exhaled through his nose. Stalin. You mean, do I think being tough is a bad thing now? Ethan smirked, adjusting his tie. Ethan, well, I think we're past the era where men need to punch their way through problems. Don't you think the world has moved on from that kind of outdated thinking? Silence. The kind that stretches just long enough to make people shift in their seats. Stallone scratched his chin. Then he laughed, not a polite chuckle, a deep, genuine belly laugh. Stalin, you're serious? You think toughness is a problem? Ethan straightened his posture, sensing control slipping. Ethan, I think it can be toxic when it discourages vulnerability. Yes. Stallone nodded slowly, like he was processing. Then he leaned back, stretching his arms across the back of his chair. Stallone, let me ask you something. His voice was low, deliberate. Stallone, if someone broke into your house tonight, do you want a tough guy in there? Or do you want someone who's going to sit down and talk about their feelings? Gasps from the audience. A few scattered claps. Ethan opened his mouth, but Stallone wasn't done. Stallone. See, toughness ain't about punching walls or yelling the loudest. It's about standing your ground when life knocks you down. It's about protecting your family. It's about discipline, respect, hard work. He shook his head, then looked Ethan dead in the eye. Stalin, and if you think the world doesn't need that anymore, I don't know what world you're living in, man. Ethan forced a chuckle, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes. Hesitation. He hadn't expected Stallone to hit back so fast, but he wasn't giving up that easily. Ethan, all right, but don't you think Hollywood, and let's be honest, your own movies, have glorified violence as the only solution to problems? Stallone didn't hesitate. Stallone, Hollywood glorifies a lot of things. He paused, then smirked. Stallone, you ever seen a movie where a guy saves the world by filling out paperwork? Laughter, this time real laughter. Even some of Ethan's crew members smirked. But Ethan wasn't done. He still had more tricks up his sleeve. The problem? Stallone was just getting warmed up. Ethan straightened his posture, adjusting the stack of cue cards on his lap, as if searching for the perfect counterpunch. He was good at this, controlling the tempo, leading his guests down a path where they had no choice but to stumble. But Stallone, he wasn't playing along. Ethan, all right, let's talk about influence. He flipped through his notes. Ethan, you've built a career playing tough, no-nonsense characters, guys who solve problems. With their fists, guns, or just brute force. Don't you ever think about the message that sends? He leaned in slightly. Ethan, I mean, don't you feel a responsibility to promote, let's say, a more progressive kind of hero? The way he emphasized progressive just enough to let the audience know exactly where this was going, made Stallone smirk. He sat up, stretching his shoulders like a boxer getting ready for the next round. Stallone, first of all, his voice was steady, controlled. Stallone, I make movies. Movies ain't real. You know that, right? He raised an eyebrow. Stallone, I mean, last time I checked, I never actually went 15 rounds with Apollo Creed. Never took down a whole army with a red bandana and a knife. Never ran up those steps in Philly and single-handedly fixed people's problems. A few people in the crowd laughed, but Ethan stayed firm. Ethan. Sure, but movies shape culture. Kids grow up watching Rambo and Rocky. Don't you think we should be giving them heroes who solve problems without violence? Stallone exhaled, through his nose. Stallone, man, you ever seen Rocky? He shook his head. Stallone, that whole movie was about getting back up when life knocks you down. It wasn't about beating people up. It was about heart, perseverance. And Rambo, he shrugged. Stallone, that guy was just trying to be left alone. If people had just let him walk through town and mind his business, none of that would have happened. The audience clapped, a little louder this time. Ethan's jaw clenched. He knew this wasn't going the way he had planned. So he leaned forward, speaking softer, more personal. Ethan, okay, fair enough, a beat. Ethan, but let's talk about the real world. He adjusted his tie, lowering his voice as if setting up for the knockout punch. Ethan, let's talk about America. Right now. We're at a point where people are questioning what it means to be a man, what it means to be tough. And some might argue that your version of toughness, the old school, don't show weakness kind, is part of the problem, that it creates more division than unity. He tilted his head slightly. Ethan, what do you say to that? Stallone let the question hang in the air. He tapped his fingers on the armrest, eyes locked on Ethan. Stallone, you ever meet a firefighter? O. Stallone versus the host. Round 3. Stallone leaned in, his presence filling the space. Stallone, you ever meet a firefighter? Ethan blinked. Ethan, excuse me, Stallone. A firefighter, a cop, a guy in the military. Hell, even a single mom working. 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Stallone's eyes locked onto Ethan's, unwavering. Stallone, you ever talk to those people? You think toughness is their problem? Ethan hesitated. The room was shifting, and he could feel it. Stallone shook his head, his voice steady. Stallone, no, man. Their toughness is what keeps the world running. A beat. The silence stretched just long enough to land the weight of his words. Stallone, the problem ain't toughness. The problem is people thinking strength is something bad, like it's dangerous. Weakness ain't a virtue, pal. He leaned forward slightly, voice calm but firm. Stallone, strength with control. That's what keeps people safe. Somewhere in the back, a man laid out a low whistle. The energy in the room had shifted. Ethan was losing his grip. Ethan, but what about? Stallone raised a hand, not aggressively, just enough to make it clear he wasn't finished. Stallone, you want to know the real problem? He leaned forward, his presence swallowing the space between them. Stallone, it's not toughness. It's people who talk about toughness like it's the enemy while living in a world built and protected by tough people. He gestured subtly to the studio around them, to the cameras, the lights, the controlled setting. Stallone, you sit here in your nice suit, with your scripted questions trying to tell me what's outdated. He let the words sit for a second. Stallone, let me tell you something, man. His voice, lowered, serious. Stallone, if the world ever really goes sideways, if things get bad, you're gonna be real happy there are still guys like me around. Dead silence. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Ethan swallowed. He had another question lined up, another attempt to regain control, but something had changed. The audience wasn't nodding along with him anymore. They were waiting for Stallone's next words. And Stallone? He wasn't letting up anytime soon. Ethan shifted in his seat. He could feel it, the energy, the momentum. It was slipping from his grip, and he knew it. This wasn't going the way it was supposed to. Stallone wasn't fumbling. He wasn't tripping over his words or getting defensive. He was owning the room. And now, the audience wasn't just listening. They were rooting for him. Ethan forced a smile, trying to regain control. "Ethan, I hear you, I do." His voice was measured, carefully controlled. "Ethan, but let's be honest, there's a difference between being strong and refusing to change. A lot of people would say that your kind of thinking, this old-school mindset, is what's holding society back." He tilted his head slightly, voice calm but pressing. "Ethan, don't you think it's time to move forward?" Stallone exhaled slowly. His gaze didn't waver. He could have come back with another joke, another sharp one-liner, but instead his tone shifted. Calm, almost reflective. The fallout was immediate. Clips of the interview flooded social media within minutes. The moment Stallone leaned in and said, "Because weak people don't like being reminded they're weak," became an instant viral sensation. Memes, reaction videos, think pieces, every corner of the internet had something to say. On one side, Stallone was hailed as a legend, a truth-teller in an era of polished sound bites and safe answers. People cheered him on, calling it the interview that exposed mainstream media, and praising his no-nonsense wisdom. On the other, media outlets rushed to spin the narrative. Headlines popped up overnight. Sylvester Stallone sparks controversy over outdated views on masculinity. Toxic toughness? Stallone. E's interview raises eyebrows. Did Ethan Caldwell just get schooled on his own show? Ethan, for his part, went into damage control mode. He posted a carefully crafted statement talking about how conversations like these are necessary to challenge outdated perspectives. But the comment section wasn't having it. Dude got bodied on his own show. You tried to trap Rocky and he dropped you like Drago. This is why nobody trusts the media anymore. Stallone, however, remained quiet. No follow-ups, no explanations, no social media posts. He didn't need to say anything. The moment spoke for itself. Somewhere in his home gym, long after the noise died down, Stallone wrapped his hands, stepped up to a heavy bag, and threw a slow, deliberate punch. He wasn't thinking about Ethan Caldwell or the headlines or the internet's reaction. He was thinking about the next fight. Because, in the end, that's what toughness really is. Backstage, producers scrambled. Ethan's earpiece buzzed with frantic voices. That did not go as planned. Social media is already picking it up. Cut the controversial parts before we post it online. But it was too late. Someone in the live audience had already uploaded clips. Within minutes, the internet was on fire. Stallone. Body slams TV host. Sylvester Stallone destroys woke media in live debate. This is why we still need real men like Stallone. The video spread like wildfire, jumping from Twitter to Facebook to YouTube. People clipped the best moments, overlaying reaction memes, slow-motion replays, and dramatic background music. Within hours, the clip was trending #1. The comments section became a battleground. I don't even like Stallone's movies, but this was incredible. He said what everyone's been thinking but too scared to say. Notice how the host had nothing when Stallone turned the tables? Classic. But the backlash wasn't far behind. Just another aging celebrity stuck in the past. Toxic masculinity at its finest. Can we stop pretending this guy is some intellectual? Ethan's network scrambled for damage control. They released a carefully worded statement about how differing opinions spark meaningful conversations. Ethan himself tweeted, "Healthy debate is important. I respect Mr. Stallone's views, even if I don't agree. Let's keep the conversation civil. But no one cared. The internet had already decided who won. And Stallone, he posted nothing. No tweets, no press statements. He simply went about his day unbothered. Because unlike the people arguing in the comment sections, he had nothing to prove. But as the dust settled, a bigger question began to emerge. Was this just a viral moment? Or had Stallone exposed something deeper about modern media? Days passed, but the clip refused to die down. Morning shows, podcasts, news segments. Everyone was dissecting what it all meant. Some called it a wake-up call. Others dismissed it as a manufactured controversy. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about Stallone anymore. People were talking about something bigger. On one side, supporters argued that Stallone had exposed the hypocrisy of modern media. How hosts like Ethan love to push an agenda but fold the second they're challenged. They expect celebrities to just nod along, one comment read. But the moment someone thinks for themselves, they freak out. Critics, on the other hand, saw it differently. Stallone is just another rich actor clinging to outdated ideas. They argued. It's easy to preach toughness when you're living in a mansion. But then something interesting happened. Firefighters, police officers, military vets, factory workers, construction crews, single moms. People who actually understood what toughness meant in the real world started speaking up. A viral Facebook post from a retired Marine spread like wildfire. Stallone gets it. Strength isn't about being a bully, it's about standing up when life knocks you down. We need more of that. A mother from Oklahoma shared a heartfelt video. I raised 3 boys. On my own. If I hadn't been tough, they wouldn't have eaten. Don't tell me strength is a bad thing. Even a quiet clip of an older man at a gas station went viral. He was watching the interview on his phone, shaking his head. These kids don't know what real struggle is, he muttered. They think life's about debating nonsense on TV. Stallone? He understands real life. Meanwhile, Ethan went silent. His network scrambled, pushing new stories to shift attention. But it didn't work. Every attempt to move on was met with the same question, over and over again. Why did a Hollywood actor have more common sense than a professional journalist? And that's when the real conversation began. Not about Stallone, not about the interview, but about something deeper. Had modern society gone soft? Were people so afraid of real strength that they wanted to pretend it wasn't necessary? Was the media shaping culture, or just controlling it? These weren't just viral talking points anymore, they were dinner table conversations. People weren't just watching, they were waking up. And Stallone, he still hadn't said a word. A week later, he finally spoke, not through a press release, not on social media. It happened during a casual interview in a small gym in San Diego, California. A local reporter asked him about the viral moment, expecting some kind of damage control. Instead, Stallone wiped the sweat from his forehead, took a sip from his water bottle, and shrugged. Look, man, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just being honest. The reporter pressed him. But did you expect the reaction to be this huge? Stallone chuckled. I've been around a long time. People always act surprised when someone tells the truth. That's the world we live in now. The simplicity of his response hit harder than any speech. No grand statement. No victory lap. Just the truth. Just a man who said what he believed and moved on. But the real impact was still unfolding. Ethan. Caldwell's show saw a quiet ratings drop. His network subtly shifted him to different segments, away from high-profile interviews. He wasn't canceled, but he wasn't the same rising star either. Meanwhile, something unexpected started happening. People began revisiting Stallone's old interviews, his speeches, even his movies. They saw them in a new light. clips of Rocky Balboa's famous monologue resurfaced. It ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Suddenly, that line wasn't just about boxing. It was about grit, resilience, real strength, and outside the online debates, in the real world, something shifted. Young men started showing up at boxing gyms, pushing themselves harder. Parents talked about teaching their kids discipline instead of entitlement. Workers stood a little taller, pushing through struggles instead of complaining about them. Not because Stallone told them to, but because they saw the difference between real strength and performative weakness. In the end, this was never about one interview. It wasn't about Stallone versus Ethan Caldwell. It was about a world that had forgotten what toughness actually meant, and one man who reminded them. If you've made it this far, ask yourself, what kind of strength do you value? The kind that folds the moment it's questioned, or the kind that stands firm when it matters most? Because at the end of the day, toughness isn't about muscles. It's about who you are when no one's watching. Like what? You heard, subscribe for more stories that make you think. Because in a world full of noise, the truth still matters.